one of the greatest names in English literature related to science fiction is Isaac Asimov. Asimov was not only an outstanding sci-fi fiction writer, he also actually wrote a lot of non-fiction stuff. What is interesting is he also wrote a book about lasers. This is something which is very surprising, and many people don't know about this particular book. Asimov, of course, was a very curious person. He also actually wrote so many interesting stuff. For example, his iRobo series has turned out to be legendary because what was erstwhile a kind of a domain of fiction has nowadays become a realistic scientific application, which means that there are some people who really can write about science fiction, which turns out to be very important going in future. Not all science fiction actually becomes a scientific application, of course, but Isaac Asimov was in that way outstanding because he played a significant role in really, projecting the scientific future into the domain which was earlier in the domain of fiction, but now it has become something very interesting. Now let's go back to this particular book on lasers. This book was written roughly in 1990s or so, and it mainly discusses about the origin of lasers and also some basic physics and engineering aspects of how lasers work. And there are some very beautiful charcoal kind of diagrams in that particular book. And it also actually very beautifully blends the historical evolution of the lasers and how lasers were invented and various different things. Lasers, as you know, is light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. It's a very different kind of light source what we generally see and use in every day. However, I should also mention that lasers are also extensively used nowadays. So lasers have become ubiquitous, and it has also become extremely important for various different applications. So in the Asimov's book, there are a lot of interesting questions related to how lasers are useful for everyday applications. One of the things he emphasizes in the discussion is about the surgery of eye, because as you know, lasers have been used for kind of ensuring that you take out the cataract or do some specific kind of an operation. And Asimov does discuss about these particular things in beautiful language, which can be understood by anybody who is a layperson. Of course, it is not a full-fledged science book, so I would be a little cautious in recommending it as a pakka physics book, but it is a light read. If you are kind of peripherally interested in a great author writing about science, I would strongly recommend this particular book. Now, Asimov also has a very interesting background. He was a biochemistry professor, and he also was actually teaching and doing research in biochemistry. And later on, he became actually a writer. And that is actually evident in this particular book because one of the topics he discusses extensively in this book is on something called as chemical lasers. Now, this is a very fascinating kind of a realm of lasers because chemical lasers are something which actually has not been completely realized even today. It was proposed roughly around 1964 by a person called as Casper in the United States of America. And it actually uses some very interesting concepts to really look into how lasers can be produced by a chemical reaction. So lasers do need some specific kind of external source of energy. And that particular external source of energy mainly comes from a chemical reaction in a chemical laser. Now, this particular chemical energy, which is provided by the chemical reaction, further excites the molecules into the excited state, and there is a transition from the excited states to the lower energy state, and therefore stimulated emission emerges out of that. It's a interesting concept where one will have to actually utilize some specific kind of a source of energy and bring out that source of energy in the form of a coherent source of light. It's a roundabout way of actually producing light, but nevertheless very fascinating. Yeah, there's also very interesting discussion in this particular book where he tries to explain the concept of this chemical laser by taking a analogy with a device which is run on a battery, where the battery actually powers that particular device. Similarly, a chemical reaction can act like a battery itself and power that particular light source. But if you really go deep into this particular concept, there are certain kind of conceptual difficulties one has to actually overcome. And therefore, it has not been very easy for somebody to realize such a kind of a laser even today. In fact, you can go look up on online, including on Wikipedia. There's a page on chemical laser, and you can see that what are the questions they are trying to address. There's of course molecular lasers, which already has been realized, excimer lasers, etc. There are some fantastic kind of forms of laser where the molecular energy states actually have been harnessed, but by using an external source, which is essentially a light source again, and that light source pumps the molecules and excites the molecules, and in the process of the de-excitation they emit the radiation. It's a beautiful concept, but chemical laser is something which is yet to be kind of realized in its complete detail. Now, while also studying this particular book and trying to explore a little bit more, I also found that there is a lot of scope for one to utilize these kind of concepts. So chemical laser is something a lot of youngsters who may want to jump in, who want to do some kind of an optics with chemistry. It's a very interesting realm of research. What is further interesting is while looking into the references of this book, which the post references who have actually read this book and cited this book, I found a very interesting translation of this book in an Indian language and in Marathi, by the way. So this particular book has been written in Marathi, translated in Marathi. And the blog link which I'm giving in the description actually has the link to that particular book, which is there on the Internet Archive, and you can explore. I don't know how good is the translation, but nevertheless, I'm very glad to see that somebody has taken effort to translate that particular book. And this book actually has been translated into Marathi by a person called as Sujata Godbole, and it's also part of the collection of Arvind Gupta's wonderful book collection, which is also available online. All these links are available on my blog page, which I am linking in the description. Do have a look. So going back to Asimov, he was a unique person, very, very kind of, futuristic kind of thinker, sci-fi writer, prolific. He has written so many books. I don't know, maybe more than 500 books or something like that. It's kind of amazing to know that a single person can be so productive in terms of writing. He blended beautifully the science fiction, history, and also a lot of interesting stories. He was a great storyteller in that sense. We need more people like Isaac Asimov, and we also need more books like what Isaac Asimov wrote, including non-fiction books. So many of you who might be interested in doing this kind of stuff, one should explore about this kind of things, because science fiction is a very beautiful area to really work on. And if somebody is really interested in thinking a little bit more in terms of fantasy, fiction, etc., one can blend science and fiction together and bring out something more than the sum of its parts, so to speak. Science meets history. Bye-bye.